Welcome to Life Stories, where the quietest people often carry the loudest battles. She was humiliated, mocked, and written off in front of a room full of strangers. And she didn't say a word. No yelling, no excuses, just a pair of old dog tags slipping from beneath her collar, and a stare that said, "You have no idea who I am." What followed wasn't revenge. It was something deeper, a reckoning, a journey from silence to strength that would shake not only her past, but the system built to keep her invisible. This isn't just a story about redemption, it's about what happens when the world underestimates the wrong woman. Stay with us, because by the end of this story, you might question how you see failure, strength, and the quiet power of those who never needed to shout. Let's begin. The first thing Logan Brooks felt was the mat, cold, unyielding, and far less forgiving than her last battlefield. Her back hit it hard, a thud that echoed louder than the stifled gasps in the room. Laughter followed, low at first, then growing like wildfire once people realized it was safe to mock her. The Iron Core Jiu-Jitsu Academy, usually cloaked in the quiet discipline of focused athletes, buzzed now with a different energy. One of scorn. One of amusement. Tyler Grayson stood over her, eyes gleaming with satisfaction, a predator in a lion's den he thought he owned. "Spin class is down the block, sweetheart," he said, brushing imaginary dust from his pristine black belt. "This mat's for real fighters." The student snickered. Phones caught every second. Logan didn't respond, not with words. She rose, silent, brushing her jai with the measured precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. A small metallic glint slipped from beneath her collar, a set of worn dog tags, before she tucked them back in, unnoticed by everyone except one older man watching from the back corner of the training hall. Her eyes briefly locked with Tyler's, not with defiance, not with fear, but something far more unnerving. Pity. He smirked, mistaking it for weakness. Back in her apartment that evening, a sparse third-floor walk-up on Mercer Lane in Seattle's working-class Southgate district. Logan sat by her window, a mug of black coffee untouched beside her. The city moved below. Delivery trucks, midnight commuters, neon flashing against wet pavement. Her living space bore the same quiet restraint she carried in herself. A couch barely holding together, a bookshelf stacked with military memoirs and physical therapy journals, and above all, a photo of a man in uniform, her father, framed beside a shadow box of medals and 2 sets of dog tags. She reached for the scar on her shoulder. Even in silence, it throbbed. They had no idea who she was. And maybe that was the point. 4 years ago, she'd been Staff Sergeant Logan Brooks, hand-to-hand combat instructor with the U.S. Marines, before the IED in Kandahar, before the surgeries, before her husband left, saying he couldn't keep living with someone who never came back. Before civilian life taught her that silence and scars weren't currency, they were weight. Now she worked at Greenwood Medical Center, helping veterans rebuild their bodies while hiding her own fractured history. She never spoke of her past. Not to coworkers, not to the patients, and certainly not to the kids at Iron Core who mistook her silence for surrender. But that night, she opened the bottom drawer of her dresser, one she hadn't touched in over a year, and pulled out a folded Marine Corps training manual. Between its pages was a business card. Dean Maddox, Ret, Combat Systems Training, Southgate Community Center. She stared at it for a long time. The next morning, Logan stood in the worn-down gym beneath a flickering overhead light. The walls smelled of rubber mats and old resolve. Dean was there, waiting, arms crossed, that same unreadable look in his eyes. "Figured you'd show up sooner or later," he said. "Tyler Grayson still playing king at Iron Core?" Logan didn't answer. She didn't need to. Dean grunted. "Then let's get to work." What followed over the next few months wasn't training. It was resurrection. Dean didn't coddle. He didn't flatter. He sharpened. Logan's body remembered, even when her mind hesitated. Her movements regained the edge they dulled after years of suppressing who she'd been. They trained late into the nights, quietly, away from the eyes that had written her off. Meanwhile, at Iron Core, the hostility grew. Her gym bag was moved. Her name was left off group emails. Tyler's comments turned from passive-aggressive to direct humiliation. "Logan here is a great example of what happens when you confuse stubbornness with skill," he'd say during demonstrations. She never responded, until one Thursday evening when Dean slid a folded flyer across the bench. West Coast Open Jiu-Jitsu Tournament, Expert Division, registration closing soon. She looked at it without expression. "You're not just training anymore," Dean said. "You're hiding in plain sight. Time to change that." She hesitated. "Tyler won't allow it. He'll pull the registration." Dean smiled. "Then don't ask for permission." A week later, tournament officials posted a last-minute bracket change. Due to a medical withdrawal, a new competitor had been entered into the men's black belt division, sponsored independently by a recognized instructor. The name listed, Logan Brooks. At Iron Core, chaos followed. Tyler stormed toward the announcement wall, his face twisted in disbelief. "She's a white belt," he barked at the tournament coordinator. But tournament policy allowed credentialed instructors outside the academy system to sponsor an applicant, and Dean Maddox had signed off. That's when Tyler saw the final bracket. He would be facing Logan in the first round. And for the first time in years, the man who thought he knew everything forgot how to breathe. What ghosts have you buried to survive? And what would it take to bring them roaring back to life? Have you ever been underestimated so deeply that proving someone wrong became the only way to prove yourself right? When the match begins, it won't just be about jiu-jitsu. It'll be about every unspoken war Logan Brooks never got to finish. Continue to part 2. The noise of the crowd vanished the moment Logan stepped onto the mat. She didn't hear the scattered whispers. "Isn't she just a white belt?" Or the snide chuckles from the Iron Core team in the corner. The polished floor beneath her feet, the cold air of the convention center, the overhead lights turning sweat into shimmer. None of it registered. What she felt was the weight of a different silence, the one that had lived inside her since Kandahar. Across from her, Tyler Grayson bounced on the balls of his feet, jaw tight, eyes refusing to meet hers. Gone was the smug showman. What stood before her now was a man terrified of being unmasked. The referee gave the signal. Match on. Tyler lunged, aggressive, leading with a sharp grip to her collar. Logan moved with him, not resisting, but guiding. A feint, a pivot, a grip switch before sliding into position. In one breathless movement, she locked her legs around his arm. Tyler twisted, too late. His face contorted, not from pain, but panic. He slammed his palm against the mat. 16 seconds. Silence fell like a curtain. The referee raised her hand. Cameras flashed. Somewhere, someone whispered the time under their breath, and it rippled through the crowd like a tremor. 16 seconds. Tyler rolled off the mat, face flushed, avoiding eye contact as he disappeared into the gathering behind the sponsor tables. Logan stood still. Not victorious, not triumphant, just still. Dean Maddox met her off the mat with a nod and a half smile. "Textbook," he said. But Logan didn't smile back. Later, in the locker room, as she peeled off her GI, something shifted. She stared at herself in the mirror. Not the woman Iron Core had mocked, not the soldier they had never seen, but someone in between. And that terrified her more than any opponent ever had, because now that the silence had broken, what came next? That night, she didn't go home. She ended up in front of her old apartment, the one she shared with David before everything fell apart. It looked the same. Weathered stairs, chipped blue paint, the third window still glowing with the soft yellow of their old reading lamp. He wasn't there. Hadn't been for over 2 years. But the memories were. She sat in her car until dawn. The following days were a blur. Clips of her match exploded online. Unknown female fighter submits black belt in 16 seconds. Articles began surfacing. Bloggers speculated about her background. Veterans commented, "That woman moves like she's been through real war." Some figured it out. Most didn't. What hurt wasn't the attention. It was what came from it. Greenwood Medical put her on temporary leave to assess the optics. A few of her patients, spooked by the viral footage, requested different therapists. The director, whom she respected, had looked genuinely apologetic. "You've become a symbol, Logan, and that makes people uncomfortable." Worse, Iron Core began spinning the story. Tyler released a vague apology online, but it dripped with condescension. Sometimes unexpected results happen. It's a reminder to always be humble, even when teaching. No acknowledgement of the months of degradation. No ownership of the smear campaign he'd led. But what truly split something inside Logan came in the form of an envelope, delivered by hand. No return address. Inside, a photograph. A black and white image of her father in uniform, mid-training with a group of Marines. Scrawled on the back in careful handwriting, "You're not the only one they underestimated. R.T." She stared at the initials. R.T. Robert Townsend. Her father had mentioned him once. A Marine saved during the bombing in Beirut. A man her father had called the best I ever trained with. Logan had never met him, never even seen a photo, but she recognized the handwriting. It was the same as the note inside her father's shadow box, the one she'd never shown anyone. The mission is the legacy, not the noise. Logan folded the photograph, tucked it into her wallet, and stared at the wall. There was a mission here, but it wasn't just about winning. It was about what came after the fight. How do you rebuild your identity after the war is over, but the battles keep finding you? Something deeper is stirring beneath Logan's victory, and the past is about to demand its due. Stay with us for part 3. Rain fell in a steady whisper outside the community center. Inside, the mat space glowed under fluorescent lights, the scent of sweat and disinfectant still hanging in the air from the last class. Logan stood alone, barefoot, in silence. Her students had left 15 minutes ago, still buzzing from drills and breakthroughs, but Logan lingered, hands on her hips, heart quieter than it had been in weeks. She had turned down every offer. Iron Corps' public apology, the speaking engagements, even the interview on national television. She didn't want fame. She wanted something real, something that wouldn't vanish when the headlines faded. Tonight had been her first time teaching trauma-based self-defense to an all-women's group. Veterans, abuse survivors, nurses who worked late-night shifts alone. Every story was different, but they all carried the same look. Eyes scanning exits, spines a little too rigid, laughter that broke too fast. Logan saw herself in them. After class, one of them, a woman named May, had hesitated at the door. "I've taken dozens of self-defense classes," she said softly, "but this was the first time I didn't feel like I was pretending." Logan had nodded, her throat tight. "That means you're ready to stop surviving and start owning the space around you." She could feel it now, that invisible shift, the purpose she had lost when she left the Marines. Not the uniform, not the command, but the mission, service, impact. Her phone buzzed from the bench. She didn't want to check it, not tonight, but the name on the screen pulled her breath short. David. She hesitated, then picked up. "Hey," came his voice, hesitant, lower than she remembered. "I, saw the video. Someone from work showed it to me, not knowing, well, you know." Logan waited. I wanted to say I'm sorry for how I left, for thinking you were broken when really, I think I just couldn't handle that you were stronger than me." There it was. The apology she had never expected, wrapped in the quiet voice of a man who had run too soon. "I'm not angry anymore," she said. "But I'm not the same person, David. I don't think I ever will be." "I know," he replied. "But you sound more like yourself now than you ever did before." She smiled faintly. "Funny, I feel more like my father." A silence stretched between them, not heavy, just complete. "Take care, Logan." "You too." She ended the call. The air in the room felt warmer, but as she began cleaning up the mats, the door opened. Dean Maddox stepped in, his broad frame outlined by the corridor light. His limp was more noticeable tonight. "You get the letter?" he asked. Logan nodded. "From Townsend," Dean exhaled. "He's dying. Stage 4 lung cancer. Wants to meet you before it's too late." She had suspected something was coming, but not this. "Where is he?" "Veterans Hospice. Tacoma." 2 days later, Logan stood at the edge of a hospice bed, clutching the photograph Townsend had sent. The man lying in the bed was gaunt, sunken, but his eyes were sharp. "I knew your father before he was a legend," Townsend rasped. "He had that same stillness you carry, like he'd seen the worst and figured out how to live with it." Logan pulled a chair close. "Why send the photo now? Because your father once saved my life, and I couldn't repay him. Not then. But when I saw your name, your footage, I realized he was still saving people through you." She blinked, throat tightening. "Before I go," he whispered, "I wanted you to know, What you're building, it matters more than medals or matches. You're healing people the same way your father did, with discipline and decency. He smiled faintly. I've got something for you. He gestured toward the drawer. Inside was a faded journal, her father's, dog-eared, full of dates, names, notes on recruits he'd mentored, and at the very back, a letter. To her. Logan read it in silence, her hands trembling. Logan, if you're reading this, it means you've come farther than even I dared to imagine. You were never made to fit into molds. You were made to break them. Quietly, completely, and with purpose. You carry my name, but your legacy will be your own. Never confuse silence with surrender. Never mistake scars for weakness. And never stop fighting for those who can't. Dad? Tears slipped down Logan's cheeks. She stayed with Townsend until the monitors slowed. Until his breath grew quiet. Until the room stilled. Weeks passed. The program grew. More veterans arrived. More women walked through the doors. One day, even Haley, former Iron Corps Golden Girl, showed up. Not in makeup or with smug smiles, but with a folded sweatshirt, eyes lowered. I want to help, she'd said. Not for me. For the ones I ignored. Logan handed her a waiver and a mop. We all start somewhere. One night, after teaching a class, Logan stepped outside into the chill of an early spring evening. She wore her GI still, dog tags now visible around her neck. No longer hidden, no longer secret. She watched a bus stop across the street. A woman stepped off, limping slightly, but carrying herself with the pride of someone who had decided she was worth rebuilding. Logan exhaled, and for the first time in years, the breath didn't carry weight. The mission was no longer something she chased. It lived in her now. What part of Logan's journey resonated with you most deeply? Comment 100 if this story meant something to you. Where in the world are you watching from? If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their strength. Thank you for watching Life Stories.